Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on The Insight. Remember that On The Insight is that program where we x-ray and give a post-mortem analysis on a number of issues that help in shaping our nation. And this morning, we'll be dealing with a very delicate, sensitive issue. Remember that recently Nigeria has been in the forefront or the front burner of discussion between the international communities concerning the issue of religious or Christian genocide. Nigeria has mounted responses. Given the very sensitive and delicate nature of this very topic, we are bringing to you a very intellectual mobile, a comrade who doesn't hold back in giving his opinion, but is very sensitive to this very issue and would provide solutions on how we'll handle such a sensitive issue. So he'll be joining us this morning to do justice to the geopolitical responses to violation of religious freedom in Nigeria. And we are speaking about Comrade Fidelis Ede, Executive Director, Service Accord Initiative. He is a lawyer and former labor leader, and he prizes himself as a practicing farmer as well. Comrade.
My honor to be here. Thank you.
It's quite a pleasure. Thank you for coming on short notice.
Thank you.
All
I'm
right.
humbled.
All right, sir. Let's not waste time. Let's just look at the issue. This is a very, delicate matter. But we are aware, given the sensitive and delicate nature of this issue, but there are many people like Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka who are of the view or describe the situation as a form of genocide, but emphasizes that it is not solely a religious one. What's your view?
Well, Bishop Kuka is one voice nobody can ignore. Internationally, he has done so much work. If you recall, he was also, when Obasanjo took over in 1999 and constituted the Okpukpu panel, I think he was secretary of that panel
yes.
and did a book, incidentally, recently, when I saw him in Abuja and spoke about the book he wrote. He said he had done another one on reconciliation, which was like a follow-up. This contest is necessary because this is not something we have to politicize. But for me, you led the word, and that word is one I will want to align with, that this topic is delicate. And when something is delicate, what it means is that you need a rational balance in approach. Yes, this matter came to light following the report of the Aid to Christians in Need, which is a Catholic organization. It's part of the review they made for 2025. And in that report, there was an estimation of about 5.4 billion people universally who currently lack religious freedom. So this point or contest shows that it was not just about Nigeria. It's an assessment of the level of religious freedom people enjoy universally, because we now accept that the world is a global village. But in the context of Nigeria, anybody who has followed the way the Nigerian nation was established from the colonial time will know that whatever is happening now is like, as sad as we may want to look at it, as agonizing as we may want to refer to it, it's a system that is obeying tradition. Because when we talk about high-handedness, injustice, a situation where the people don't matter, you will discover that it postdated even the amalgamation of 1914. We know of revolts of 1905. We know of the Aba women riots. We know of the River Valley massacre, Ekumeku. All these were in the 20s. And if you move down, the recent one, which is not just about indigene, you look at the aspect where government high-handedness has also perpetuated kind of what can be likened to what we are discussing. If you refer to, that was under the Shagaris government when the Baccalaureate Dam was constructed or about being constructed in Niger. You will see the process that dislocated the farmers, whereby many were killed in trying to relocate them. You look at the Oji Zakibiam situation. So the point I'm making is that we have a system where a culture where the rights of indigents, because I'm careful not to use the word citizen.
Okay.
The question is, are we citizens?
Okay.
Yes, we have a constitution that tries to ascribe certain status to Nigerians. But if you look at the right of citizens, the question will be, we are more indigenous, we are more tribal, we are more sectional in Nigeria than the fact that we will begin to talk about citizenship. If you look at the struggle before independence, Nigeria was not a country, because if we had a political party that referred to its name as Northern People's Congress, it was very clear that it wasn't a party that was inclusive. If you look at the action group, if you look at NCNC, you will discover that there has been this move to get Nigeria to be a nation for all. And if we are coming from that perspective, you will discover that the issue of self-help, the issue of people just rising against one another. You know, when people talk about what the South is, the Igbo, I want to be careful so that this discussion is not about the Igbo. But when people talk about what is happening currently in Lagos, or what had happened about the abandoned property, I say that part of what we have lost is that we are not tracking history. If you look at the report of Onyuke, Justice Onyuke, arising from the massacre of Ndibo in northern Nigeria, you will discover that about sometime in 1953, there was even a move to legislate that the Igbos should not be allowed to own property in Kaduna. And if you look at what followed, recently I had the honor and privilege of reviewing a book about Ojukwu, written by Ken Esolonye. And one of the regrets Ojukwu had from the writer was the fact that at the wake of the 1966 crisis, the Igbos had returned to eastern Nigeria in their droves, but following assurances that was given by the then governor of northern region, he asked the Igbos to return back to the north. And that was when the actual massacre now I don't think Ojukwu ever forgave himself until death on that. If you also look at the track of the Igbos escaping from the north, you will discover that much of what we suffered in terms of death was around the middle belt, Benue in particular. So the point I'm making is that this thing is not about religion. It's about that I didn't know how we came to be more tribal than even trying to accept that we have to be one country. And if you look at the core north, you will, like what is happening in Plateau and Benue, you will discover that it is not entirely about religion. It's about indigenous and settlers. So my analysis, or the context I'm trying to establish, is that in Nigeria, people identify more with where they are from. The idea of religion is coincidental. If you track the history of Boko Haram, even those who have interpreted it, it's like a vote of no confidence or a rejection of Western education. It's not as if it's a rejection of Christianity. But they said, no, this model of education have not served us any good. From there, we knew what happened before the other aspects of header, farmers' crisis, and what have you. So I will want to align with myself with Bishop Kuka. Yes, we have tragedies, we have persecution, we have things that didn't even happen during the Civil War, happening now. But we can narrow this to the point that if we stay in 2025 in Nigeria, have government talk about ungoverned spaces, whether you are talking in the north, whether you are talking in the west or in the east, where non-state actors take over and want to establish control, it is more in the north. What it means is that the trajectory of constituting a country, we've lost it, because to constitute a country, the first value is the constitutive environment where you establish your jurisdiction and say, this is where we're in control. Then the second aspect is governance. To be able to conduct governance where you are now in control. That is what you call the jurisdiction you govern. But to be effective, to be able to deliver this aspect is the most important aspect, which is the technical capability. So what has happened is that we'll have a situation, we'll have governments, we have a situation, we'll have a space, geographical space called Nigeria. But we've not been able to establish governance that deliver inclusiveness to the Nigerian people. So resort to self-help, resort to things that are not allowed within civil liberty and rights is usually easy for those who think it's a path to track. But it is more because of the level of reorientation, the orientation we have imbibed. Nigerians see themselves, like I've said earlier, more as northerners, and even as northerners, are you a Fulani, are you a Hausa, where do you belong? Even where you think you have a dominant religious culture, let's take for instance the southeast. You also, if you take Ebonyi State for instance, the unending crisis, I think, between the Izi and the Ezas, you will discover that it has nothing to do with religion. So the point I've tried to lay is that we have a country, yes, we have a constitution, yes, but we have a governance model that have not been able to assure the people, pursuant to the constitution, in terms of welfare and protection of the rights. So people easily resort to self-help, and banditry seems to profit. And those who, you know, when you have a system where subculture profit from economic benefit, you now discover that it is a challenge to whatever government you have in place.
Okay. If I get correctly, the fundamental, just to digress a bit, the fundamental challenge here in Nigeria is that Nigerian's constitution is talking about the citizen without first recognizing the indigenous people of Nigeria.
You see, every constitution, including the United States Constitution, pursues ideals. And these ideals is where you want to be, where you want to be as a country. In the Constitution has established the obligations and duties of government that you'll find in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is the deriving principle. And that's why when we talk about the Nigerian political system, I'm one of those who say that the ideology in the in Nigeria is that the Constitution has already imposed ideology. There is no choice. Any party can begin to say we want to move this way, because the Constitution allows freedom of association through which people can come and form political party. But I think in section 225, it also said for those who will form party, there must be a manifesto they will register at INEC before they can be allowed. There are other conditions, but I just want to speak to this. And that manifesto will be derived from Chapter 2.
Okay.
That Chapter 2 is the fundamental objective. And if you go there, it covers a lot of values. You will see economic, you will see political, you will see social, educational, and what have you. But if you look at section 16, which is economic, you will see that the formulators of the Constitution had anticipated that the Nigerian system is unbalanced, and that the business of government must be such that they must pursue deliberately through objective policies inclusion for all the citizens.
Okay.
In fact, it prohibits that the resources and wealth of this country should be vested in the hands of few. In fact, when you hear about privatization, deregulation, and what have you, you discover it violates even some aspects of that Constitution. And when the Constitution clearly states as its social objective the welfare and security of the people, it tells you that it has designed that the government has to provide for the citizens, and went on, I think, in section 14 to talk about citizens' participation. Because it is through participation that people can begin to input their interest in the policies of governance.
Okay.
So, having not deliberately attained this, and the structures through which this will be attained are also contained in this Constitution. If you look at the tiers of government, in terms of the federal, state, and local government, they all have responsibilities that must also derive in terms of social welfare and the economic objective from the Chapter 2. If you also look at the other arms of government in terms of executive, legislature, and judiciary, you will discover that is why the legislative arm comes first, because that is the lawgiver. So we have all the complements that ought to produce a vibrant participatory citizenship category. But in producing that, it is expected that the government will deliberately create an environment where social forces who participate in programs will thrive, because the Constitution is not designed in a way that individually has comprehended. Just like part of the title I bear this morning is being a practicing farmer. So it is expected that a category of farmers should be able to participate in formulating policies that will advance agriculture.
All right.
You know, so having not done this, you discover that there is one aspect of democracy we are not looking at, particularly in Nigeria.
Which is?
Democracy sought to destabilize through colonialism the traditional indigenous mobilization and loyalty centers, and promised to offer something new through government regulation of rights. But you discover that having destabilized that center and having not offered what it ought to offer in terms of citizenship and their rights, the people easily will return to where they were dislocated, which is more familiar, even if they are not, which is closer, even if they are not familiar. And because of the law, you discover that there are also restrictions. Yes, you have traditional institutions, for instance, that play role, but not regulated under the law in terms of constitutional role.
All right.
You know, so the point I'm making is that what you have had in terms of injustice has created an environment where people now take laws into their hands, but in perpetrating their acts, whether it is banditry, whether it is criminality, there is this mask that there must be perceived from the higher value of, is it religious? But even in religion, if we take the case of Boko Haram and the jihadists, you will also discover that they are against, moderate Muslims. So it's not just about Christians. They also insist on their own variant of Islam. So it's not as if they go about asking people, are you a Muslim or are you a Christian? So it's a state of anarchy. And in a state of anarchy, you discover that anything thrives. But whether there is persecution, there is. Whether it can be likened to genocide, that I cannot be able, because the word genocide came into being following the Jewish, the Holocaust and all that. So I've not seen an outright, just like Bishop Kuka said, I've not seen an outright government-sponsored program. But we saw a kind of insensitivity under Buhari in his appointments. But even at that, it could be subtle, but I didn't think there was a clear government policy that tried to target a section of the people. But obviously, if you throw a bomb in a market, those who regularly attend the markets will be the worst victims. That's the way it should be seen.
All right, comrade. Then, we may be forced to want to ask, how then do we distinguish between genuine religious persecution and ethnic or political violence that may be characterized as religious genocide?
It is very, very difficult to do that. Because what I'm saying is difficult is that, first of all, in Nigeria, politics has compelled us to wear a lot of masks. You wear the marks of tribalism. You wear the marks which is perpetuated by ignorance. Let us even take the economic situation in the country. I usually will, when people talk about political power, there's no, we don't, it's a historical fact that political power has domiciled more in northern Nigeria than any other part. In fact, if you look at the western Nigeria, this is the second time or the third time, if we are to include Obasanjo's first term as military head of state, then secondly as civilian head of state, then now you have Tinubu. The East, I don't know how we can classify Zeke, who had more of a ceremonial position. But the point there is that the North, whether you take the military or you take the civilian, seem to have had exercised more of political power. But again, I ask, why is it that the level of poverty, I am not profiling, I'm speaking to facts.
Yes.
Why is it that you'll find more of incident of ignorance out of school children, more of insensitivity to the welfare of the people, in the same environment that have dominated political power, because through political power, you use it to create economic empowerment for your people, cultural and educational enlightenment. Why is it so? It is so because under Lugard, he looked at the fact that, one, they didn't know that colonialism will end the way it ended. That is, their agitation for independence will thrive. So one of the things they did was to collaborate with the northern emirs, who, yes, religious leaders, but they were more of cultural leaders that controlled the people. So what they did was to hedge then what they call Western education, and looked at the more educated Southerners as irritants to their ambition of domination. If you looked at the introduction of indirect rule, it speaks to this point I'm making. You know, but you see, if you follow the natural sequence of reaping what you sow, when we attained independence, which you knew ought to have been in 57, but the North not being ready, you know, couldn't, even in 60, only that the British then felt, okay, if you don't want it, we have to postpone, because by then they had already had the Willing Commission report on minority, you know. So it came, but when it came, it was not for Nigeria, because the regional government was in situ. So, but for the reform that took place, I think it was Mauritania, where you have now to have national political party, you know, which started in 1999. You discover that the North didn't even bother to campaign in the West or in the Eastern region, because they had the number that will always make them leaders. So, but the question is that what kind of governance was conducted? It was very clear that you had a rule that impoverished the people, made them ignorant, for them to be easily controlled. And this is part of what we are seeing. But there is a limit to exploitation, just like slavery. Yeah, people will tell you how slavery ended, but they will not tell you that it naturally wouldn't have continued, because it came to a point where the economic value of slavery wasn't sustainable. So the point I'm making is that we have not been able to transit from what we had before and after independence. And what people inherited, just like state creation, is that when they think they have their own empire, they replicate the same culture or structure that they had contested against, and becomes the new masters without allowing civil liberty to thrive. So you find that injustice, lack of access to governance, and the imposition and the exploitation continue to thrive. And that is why governance seems to be removed from the people who are yet not citizens.
All right, comrade. Therefore, one may not be wrong to say that what we should be probing in Nigeria is not the propaganda of Christian genocide, rather the lack of arrest, successful prosecution of banditry, extremism, particularly, let's say, in the Middle Belt, for example.
Well, when we analyze this within the context of Obibeyin tradition, you will discover that we got a culture whereby we allow these things to thrive. And as it thrived, it became more of, you know, there is this saying in Igbo, that when a bad act, you know, is allowed over a period, it becomes a culture, you know. So the issue of Middle Belt, what we have now is an escalation But if you also look at the struggle of the Middle Belt under Joseph Taka, you will discover that the Middle Belt has always been in the struggle for liberation. It's always been there. Because when you look at the Tiv riots, it was not something that just happened without a cause. So over time, I just made reference to the Mahdi incident, I think of 1905. You know, the point I want to make here is that the manner through which colonialism constituted the current state known as Nigeria has never been questioned or interrogated.
Okay.
So the culture has continued to thrive. You know, how do you now reconcile the fact that in a country such as Nigeria, with the constitution we have, that talked about justice and equality, that you have 12 states, for instance, in the north, that is, they have Sharia, the dictates of which and value contradicts clearly the provision of chapter 4, which was fundamental human rights of citizens. And you ask yourself, how do you deal with that? How can you have a subsystem operating within a national system that ought to guarantee civil liberty? Because look at the point I'm making. If we are practicing, which is what we ought to be practicing, the presidential system, we will want to look at America. And there are 4 values on which democracy, presidential system of democracy is anchored. You talk about what they call political democracy, which is the tenured system of election. People will always elect their representative. You now talk about civil liberty. And it is civil liberty in America, the way it has been operated, that you discover that it is almost impossible for rights to be violated.
Right.
If you remember or recall that even the present American president was convicted by courts for several years and what have you, until he was sworn in. It's just because of the existence of a rights regime that allows that before right can be violated, you must have exhausted all the processes. Then you have equality of reward. That is the 3 angle. Equality of reward. Then you have equal opportunity. But in Nigeria, you know, we don't have all this. And yet, we are practicing democracy. So a situation, for instance, you are in the north, and you are right. I just read something yesterday about in Kano, a content creator. I think there was something they did.
Yeah.
And the court is now mandating him to marry within. So how do you reconcile that? You know, so I believe these are part of the challenges, red flags, and hiccups that have made it impossible for us to weld. We can't deny that we have challenges, but paths have crossed. Nigeria is not a place you can now say these people are this or the other people are this. So it's a complex situation, but it is not something you can just classify and say that a particular set of people. I just gave you example, the one government perpetuated. Whether you are talking about the baccalaureate incident, even the Bacha, you know, the Mambila, you know, when they started the Oji, the Zakibiam, you know, these are the ones perpetrated by government agents. So it was not whether people were attacked religiously and what have you. So we have a system where people find it difficult, just like you mentioned, to obtain justice. And where people cannot access justice, self-help now takes over. But that self-help now, when you begin to categorize it, you either categorize it as tribal, depending on the context, or you categorize it as religious, depending on the content. If you look at even the issue of settlers, indigenous, that is predominant in the north, you discover it is not solely religious, depending on the side you find yourself. So the Nigerian situation is very complex, and I think it's not something international communities should just classify, because what it do is that it will worsen even the effort, like Bishop Kuka said,
All right.
of reconciliation and the interfaith progress in conversation that had taken place.
All right. Comrade, on that note, we'll go on a short break.
Okay.
When we return, we'll continue to probe this issue.
Hello, I'm Debra Wankova. I am Chidimike Mede.
I am Uche Osai.
I'm Chiwendo Ifeonwankwe.
My name is Obobina Samson.
Please keep watching Aneke TV, or you can visit us on our socials like Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, or YouTube, all at Aneke TV.
This is Aneke TV. We move with the world.
Thank you for staying with us. And we're still probing the issue of geopolitical responses to violation of religious freedom in Nigeria. And we've been x-raying this topic with Comrade Fidelis Ede, who is the former Labour leader and a lawyer. He prides himself as a practicing farmer. He's the executive director, Service Accord Initiative. Comrade, let's look at the U.S. angle to this whole issue. You know, the U.S. recently designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern regarding religious freedom. What implications does this designation have for Nigeria, international relations, and domestic dynamics?
Well, I think this point has to be made clear that for every action, there's always an interest. So the question will be, in I think 2020, it was Trump administration that had designated Nigeria as a country of concern and placed certain embargo on the country. And if you recall, when President Jonathan was in office, the attempt to procure military hardwares and what have you that would have helped that government to deal with the then Boko Haram hadn't gotten as interest as it is. It is now something that was revealed that all those were part of the scheme to get Jonathan out of office. And we have also learned from the likes of El-Rufai and what have you, what they did to try to destabilize Jonathan, some of which is what we are suffering, because it's very obvious from records and revelations that part of the banditry in the north were people who were brought in preparatory to be used, assuming the election hadn't gone the way. So it was like a fait accompli. So for me, in international politics, you will discover that since Trump came in, Trump has tried to conduct himself as an empire builder. the American interest for Trump, what they call Make America Great Again, is one that is very, very obvious, immersed in economic and military spirituality. So the question will be, if one had an opportunity, is to interrogate the interest of, I think, Senator Cruz, the man who is pushing this agenda. And if you look at the lobby system in American politics, you discover that there is nothing that happens that people don't lobby for. So the question here will be, who are those pushing this agenda?
Okay.
Because if under Trump, this was raised and the embargo placed, then Biden came in and removed it. What has happened between then and now? Because from the analysis, I am not denying that Nigeria has challenges. Challenges that at every given time, I begin to even say, are we already in a state of anarchy? But if we also look at the consequences of anarchy, you will discover that one of the things that happens is that it destroys the status quo, the collaborative mechanisms, the governmental mechanisms through which governance ought to thrive. Because governance is about the people. We are not returning to the bush. We are not returning to the primitive time. So when anarchy thrives, and assuming it succeeds in even taking over a system, it will still need a level of cooperative mechanism to thrive. Anarchy cannot, the French Revolution is a clear example. You know, the American, that one didn't even qualify for revolution. It ought to be kind of liberation. But you will see the difference between the French and the American system. The system, the revolution, tried to even redefine man, questioned even the existence of God. But the American system, yes, challenged the British hegemony without actually destabilizing or disowning the structures that were in place. And in redefining their own system, they didn't quite even institute democracy. Because a system, you purport to have democracy, but have what you will call electoral college that can unturn popular decision, or even what the outcome of the electoral college have it turned by the vice president sitting as the president of Senate. You know, the American system is complex if you understand it. So you discover that America is designed in a way that there are people that own it, no matter how you say. So what is the interest of the people that purport to own America in Nigeria? That's where I'm pushing. You know, there will always be that interest. And at every given time, no matter what anybody talks about Abacha, you will discover that under him, Abacha was the one that focused Nigeria towards China. That is the Asian model. And America was not comfortable with the way Abacha started going. I'm not talking about even how he came to power, violation of civil liberties and what have you. You know, how he tried to muzzle, how he tries to. But I'm saying that at every given time, if you also look at other African countries, whether it is the Francophone, you know, whether it is the British, you will discover that at every given time, it is the economic and military superiority of the presiding nation, particularly if they are the one that have colonized. And America goes to no country without costs, from what we've seen. So for me, America designating Nigeria as a country of concern. Concern for who? Concern for who? There are a lot of things America can do to support the extermination of insurgents, but they're not doing it. You know, I just made reference to the experience where Jonathan had to be denied access to certain class of weaponry and what have you. So we must be careful, you know, running about this American narrative about designating. yes, these are issues that we are battling. But if you look at, for instance, under the current president, you have Buhari that clearly appointed Muslims, you know, to sensitive. In fact, Buhari's executive council was as if it was Islamic. But if you look at the current president and look at certain positions, you know, chief of defense staff, even the recently appointed INEC chairman, you look at the chairman of the National Governing Party, APC, and what have you, you can see some level of inclusion, of balance in terms of faith. So what I'm saying is that let's not use, for instance, because these reports of 2025 is not about 2025. It's about the past, but it's coming now. So the report, does it include the efforts now that have been made? You know, so we must be careful when we talk about America. America, from what I've seen, does not just go. America is no longer a Father Christmas. So under Trump, no. America now takes its pound of flesh wherever they think is necessary. So it has shown even in international organizations like what is this? And there's this UNICEF and other organization where America has backed out. WTO, just name it. So as long as Trump is concerned, America is a business big man.
Okay. Now that you've mentioned it, you question what is the interest of the owners of America. Will it be right to ask that if this Americans' involvement or attempt to redesignate Nigeria is an infringement on the sovereignty of Nigeria or an involvement in our internal affairs?
Well, you see, America has tried to conduct itself as the policeman of the world. But you can see countries that are bold. If you take China, for instance, China has battled America to a standstill. You know, you take even American engagement with Europe, you know, even Britain. So the point is that we will not succumb. I wouldn't want Nigeria to succumb. Okay, if America designates us as country of concern and embargo is being placed, how does it serve the purpose of the citizens that are already being persecuted? We know what is happening in the Middle East, Gaza and Hamas and the Israeli challenge. So, for instance, if a man is starving his household and you decide not to allow him access to food, how does it ameliorate the starvation of the household? So I think the American system ought to be redefined. And like you said, America must begin, well, it's not that America must begin. Nigeria must begin to assert its sovereignty. But government must take deliberate steps to ensure that citizens begin to have access to justice. Okay. And the easiest way to do it is that the tiers of government must begin to be functional. Let me tell you, if the local government system in Nigeria has operated the way it is designed, and the local government are center of mobilization where you have over 70%, now let me use the word, citizens now, because we are now talking about Nigeria, reside. What it means is that you would have created an economic evolution whereby, as a result of enlightened self-interest, people will now have vested interest where they are domiciled. And one thing that has become very clear is that where people have enlightened interest in terms of economic empowerment and presence, they fight back when they see those who want to disrupt their way of life. But when people live in poverty, when people are impoverished, when people have nothing to defend, they have no choice because they're already down. So the failure of the local government system, up till now, you discover that it has been a struggle. Even the president, when he, as a result of the Supreme Court decision that the local government ought to be autonomous and receive their money, and the president signed an executive order, you saw the resistance from states, you know. So why would we continue to operate a system that impoverishes the people at the base where they have to? Because at the end of the day, Nigeria is not an abstract thing. If you look at the Land Use Act, you will discover, yes, they will tell you that the land is vested in hand of the governors and what have you. But you will also discover that that act never, there was nowhere it appropriated ancestral lands of the people, which is more. You know, for instance, when you want to build in your community, you don't go obtaining any permission from government. Yes. So why is it that the local government that have to empower the people to be able to express themselves where they are as indigenes, even if they are settlers? Once people have economic empowerment, you will discover that they develop some level of resistance, and resistance caused by knowledge, expression, and engagement. So, but a situation where government has abandoned the people on their own, it is not land that people have no investment, and you describe those places as ungoverned spaces. Ungoverned spaces means that those who have capacity can occupy, and that is what we are seeing.
All right, comrade, for want of time, I want to ask in a very brief advice, what would be your advice to the Nigerian authorities and their global partners concerning the complicity of this issue in regards to protection of vulnerable communities in Nigeria and reconciliation?
Well, the first one is to the citizens. And I will use the Igbo saying that he who is abandoned don't have to abandon himself. Nigerian citizens seem not to even understand the orientation they need to exercise as citizens. And that's why we have remained indigenous people. That is one. Then for government, because government is something that comes, is transitional, you know. We have seen that we are in a situation which Hobbes described as anarchy. You know, life is short, brutish, and a lot of people live meaningless life. Government must take deliberate steps to begin to implement Chapter 2 of the Constitution and create meaningful life for the vulnerable people so that they can begin to find meaning to live. Anybody without meaning in life actually has no basis to continue to stay. And in that situation, you have anarchy.
All right. Thank you very much, Comrade Fidelis Ede, Executive Director, Service Accord Initiative, practicing farmer, lawyer, and former labor leader. Thank you for doing justice to this issue.
My honor.
And to you, our guest, you've listened to our seasoned guest on the issue of geopolitical situation of the classifying Nigeria or redesignating Nigeria based on genocide tendencies. But want your views on this issue? Reach us with the hashtag The Insight, all on our social media handles at Aneke TV, on TikTok, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Thank you for staying with us. I'm still your host, Uche Osai. Till we'll come your way, same time tomorrow.